Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Sage's webinar with Hammock, talking about landlords. Now, when we think about landlords, it's more than just property and rental income. It's all about, as an accountancy firm, how can we sort of make more money from that client base who tends to pay us late, don't have the best accounting records, plus also there's an element of change happening in the market. Now, it's fair to say that landlords have had a bit of a tough time over the past recent years, whether that's been increasing mortgage rates, especially most recently, changes in the legislation, how interest has been dealt with. There's been whole changes in stamp duty, so people think about how they invest, what they should buy, when they should sell, and then also talk about selling CGT changes. So there's an awful lot of change in the market, which means I suspect you're starting to hear and receive far more conversations from your clients about what they should be doing. And then we have that little thing called MTD for ITSA. Whether it's happening in 2024 or another date, is all about how we can work with landlords in a way which gives us the information which we need to actually file the quarterly updates, and also more importantly, how we give a better experience to them in the first place. Because as we appreciate, when business owners, and landlords are business owners in the eyes of HMRC, when they're maintaining accounting records, they have greater visibility of what they're doing, which naturally means they have a greater, better understanding around taxes. So before we go into the detail of today's webinar, like everything, there's a little bit of housekeeping. So today you can see us on the screen. Well, also there's a couple options there. So there's a mute button and everyone's muted automatically. But also I would really encourage you to ask as many questions as you can, because we're going to be touching on terms of what the product looks like, but also some of the other themes which you'll be going through as a business owner in terms of making tax digital going forward, but also think about how you're going to work with your clients to actually improve the experience which you have with them. So what are we going to be talking about today? So obviously we feel there's an opportunity with landlords generally in the market. We're going to discuss that. Then also discuss the challenges which we have with landlords. Do you love them or do you loathe them? Then think about the bookkeeping needs. It's just not about spreadsheets. It's just not about MTD. It's reporting. It's about how do we actually deal with self-assessment in a more structured manner, a more profitable manner. And when we talk about profit, what should we be doing in terms of pricing strategies? And I think when we bring in software, it changes the dynamics as well as changes it and gives the opportunity of conversations in terms of how your landlord clients should pay you. And then also, more importantly, we'll be going through a Hammock or a demo all about Hammock. So my name's Chris Downing. I'm the Director for Accounts and Bookkeepers here at Sage. So I was an accountant by trade for nearly 20 years. And I'm joined today by James from Hammock. So James, could you quickly introduce yourself, give a bit more flavour about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, certainly. Hey, Chris. So my name is James. I work in the business development team at Hammock, but I've been at Hammock since day one. So I've been here through the journey from, originally we built Hammock to sell directly to landlords. I'm a landlord, the founding team of landlords. We built this for us, essentially, thinking that other landlords would have the same problems. And it's just then so many of our clients, accountants, then started getting in touch saying, this is amazing, but it'd be even better if we could access it ourselves. And so we built the accountant side of our business, and that's kind of the journey we've been on. But really looking forward to showing everybody a demo and hopefully seeing how you can take these clients who can be a bit of a pain to actually turning them into your best clients.
Brilliant, thank you. So let's start talking about landlords, but actually let's start talking about the market. So in terms of numbers, there are 2.74 million landlords in the UK. So these are individuals who own property and they're renting out to other individuals in the UK. So this isn't commercial property. This is just the normal sort of buy-to-let and furnished-to-holiday-let market. On average, people have about 1.93 properties each, let's call it 2, which basically goes to show that most people are actually investing in at least a second or a third property. They're seeing this as an investment opportunity, but also in terms of when you think about investments, people think about the future, and whether it's pensions or just another secondary income, rental market is certainly a booming area. Now, also, it's the fact that last year, 2021, there was another 147,000 individuals who came into self-assessment because they had bought a property and now they're renting it out. So there are going to be naturally more and more individuals calling upon an agent for the very first time to help them with self-assessment. But also the fact that with increasing rental prices, the fact that there are more homes available for renting, the actual value of, let's say, rental market to the UK economy is huge. close to £55 billion in terms of rental payments per annum. And also when you think about this, what represents in terms of lending, it's so important, that fact that if you're renting out property, that you understand the yield value, the return you're receiving, but also it's more important in managing the rental income which you're receiving as well. But also, it's just not about actually the value of the rental market. It's also there are changes in the market. When you consider the fact that interest rates are increasing, people are concerned about what they should do with their property portfolio. Should they sell it? Should they reinvest in it? Should they buy more? Are there deals to be had? Not probably at the moment, but there's certainly thinking about what they should be doing in terms of the lending market. But also there are other legislation changes. So for those who are not aware today, if you're renting out a property, it needs to be at least a grade E in terms of the energy efficiency, that sort of EPC register. But actually from 2025, any new properties which are rented out need to be at least a grade C. And then by 2028, all properties which are rented out needs to be a grade C as well. So that you just imagine over the next couple of years, the conversation isn't just about should I buy, should I sell, should I invest? What am I going to be doing in terms of actually improving the energy efficiency of my property portfolio? How do I get the tax deductibility for it? Is it worth investing another £4,000, maybe £5,000 to bring a property up from a D up to a C? So there's going to be even more conversations from your landlord clients about what they should be doing with their portfolio. And with any conversation, you need the confidence in the numbers, which naturally means where am I getting that data from? So when we think about data, when we think about landlords, why do we love them? Why do we loathe them? Now, with most landlords, that rental income is usually just a side hustle. If they've either bought them something as a little buy-to-let and a little investment for the long-term future, they may have inherited the property. So it's a bit of an accidental landlord type of approach. They don't really think about selling that property in the long term. Now they've got this rental income that they have to deal with, and therefore that pain, that sort of aggravation of, let's say, disclosing it to HMRC is something which they always put to the last moment. But also, some people are seeing, let's say, property as a real long-term investment. They bought their first property, they've done it up, they're using that cash to actually buy the second one, and suddenly over a couple of years, they haven't got two, they maybe have five, maybe even more properties. Now, this is actually a growing market, and more people are actually investing in that property portfolio. But also it's the fact that with staycation being a little bit more popular, for the obvious reason over the last couple of years, people are also thinking about how they actually maybe use properties further afield. So furnished holiday lets are becoming more popular. But also the fact that people are always focused upon tax. And tax, whether it's income tax or maybe putting your property portfolio in terms of a limited company shell, that is also just creating more conversation, but also more challenges in terms of the bookkeeping records. Now, when you talk about bookkeeping, let's be honest, I think most landlords probably only think about tax once a year. They leave it maybe very, very late, leave it to January. And really, in terms of the records they do maintain, they're probably very simple, if they do exist in any shape or form. And then also you've got those other challenges in terms of, do they use a managing agent? So the managing agent may be managing the property on their behalf. They're taking the cash, they're sharing maybe the net proceeds, less the original costs. Then also the fact that how are all these data and all these data points and paper records maintained? But also the fact that when you think about the conversation which you have with your landlords, because the conversation is probably quite late in the day, quite close to the filing deadline, really just try and get the tax return prepared. You may get the information for the rental income, the original expenditure, but actually, are you maximizing the expenditure available? Because is the landlord actually capturing all the information on a timely manner throughout the month, which can then be shared with you to actually maximize or reduce the tax liability accordingly because they've got all the records together? But also it's the fact that the attitude of landlords is they don't see themselves as businesses, even though HMRC do actually see them as a business owner. And therefore, because of this attitude, they really believe that tax isn't something they need to be dealing with in a timely manner. They leave it to the last minute. And then also when they engage an accountant or a bookkeeper to help with the self-assessment, it's usually because they're wanting that professional judgment call in terms of how to deal with some of those allowances. But also that tax bill, which they probably receive quite late in the day, is sort of unpredictable. And it has been changing over the last couple of years in terms of the changes in terms of interest relief available, but also the fact that with the changes in terms of capital relief going forward, if people are selling their property portfolios, they're thinking about what are the tax liabilities going forward. Now, also your relationship with these landlords, because of the quality or the information being shared and maybe the perceived value of maybe doing the tax return, the work which you do perform is probably quite low margin. And when you think ahead and think of the challenges of making tax digital in terms of that quarterly reporting, where if a landlord has more than £10,000 of rental income, or if they've also got a sole trade on the side, that'll naturally bring them into MTD for ITSA. How are you going to try and get these clients, these landlord clients, to start maintaining records digitally, but also sharing information on a more regular basis in terms of this filing? And as I said, it's the fact that because the margin is quite low and the fact that conversation is usually after the year end, those opportunities for maybe for more advisory, maybe sort of tax planning services are usually, let's say, stymied because you don't have the information. It's always after the date. And also your clients are probably not perceiving the value of which you can actually deliver as an accountant. So landlords are a growing market. Landlords will be seeking more advice and guidance from you over the coming years. And also we've got MTD, it's sometime in the horizon when they'll naturally be using digital tools. So this is why the point of this conversation, this webinar today, is actually showcase what is possible with bookkeeping tools and also the experience which you can now deliver with your landlords. But before we start going to the data, let's start thinking about the scenarios which are going to take place going forward. So whether you're a single property landlord or a joint ownership, you're always thinking about what sources of information have you got. Usually it could be a single private personal bank account. You may actually be buying other services from other bank accounts, maybe use a credit card. So trying to get all that information into one place can be a challenge sometimes. But also it's the fact that there'll be out-of-pocket expenditure, plus also maybe you using a managing agent. You've got various sources of records which need to be collated, brought together, automated hopefully, but also give the element of accuracy of the information actually brought together. But when you've got the situation where you're either a husband and wife, whether you've got a mixed property portfolio, you're thinking about how do I have the records that are available, which I can split the transactions out. And also, as those are two individuals, you may have different responsibility or different lending or different debts in the place, which actually affects the interest relief, which you may actually have going forward. But also the fact that whether you're buy-to-let, furnished holiday lets, or even if your property is overseas, it's trying to keep all that information in a manner which is succinct and is very clear to report upon. So yes, spreadsheets may have been the manner which you've probably been managing landlords for quite some time. But as we try and sort of make better use of our own time as accountants working forward, think about the needs of maybe our other clients, we're thinking about how can we make our rental property landlord clients a little bit more efficient, plus also have access to the information. Then we must also think about MTD for ITSA. So we're going from a situation where we're producing a very simple income and expenditure tax return, filing that once a year, to maybe producing a quarterly update once every 3 months, an end of period statement, as well as the final declaration. So naturally, maybe maintaining digital records in an Excel spreadsheet is not going to be the most efficient manner, which actually brings into play the use of software and why we need to use software to actually improve that experience. But also, when we think about landlords, as I said, landlords probably pay us the least amount from our client portfolio. So when you think about what can we do to actually maybe increase the revenue we're gaining from them, but also make sure they get paid on time, but also more importantly, have those opportunities of actually delivering that extra advice when we need to do so. So when you think about self-assessment, under the current rules of MTD for ITSA, self-assessment for our landlords will all end with 23-24. So at some point in the summer of 2024, you'll be filing or preparing the very last self-assessment tax return, the very last SA 105. You'll be doing the work, producing the return, billing them, and hopefully getting paid on time. But with MTD for ITSA, we've got that new theme of work kicking off from 2024. Your clients will be required to maintain their records digitally. Either you or they'll be filing a quarterly update to HMRC. Then you'll also have the end of period statement and the final declaration. And this is going to be a continuous theme of work. Now, if we can get our clients to be paying us monthly, that's certainly going to be an easier conversation or a transition from we go from, let's say, filing the self-assessment tax return to maybe the quarterly updates or the end of period statements, because the data is already digitized. And I think this is the important factor to remember is when we come to that year of transition from self-assessment to MTD, we will effectively be performing twice the amount of work. And therefore, we would be wishing to try to be remunerated for twice the amount of effort as well from our clients. But if we can get our clients to be maintaining their records digitally already, have access to, let's say, profit and loss accounts or income expenditure reports in a live manner, Therefore, the actual reporting to HMRC should be easier, and therefore actually the burden of cost should be lower as well. Now, so if we can get our clients to be using software as soon as possible, that software cost naturally is going to be a subscription, a monthly fee. And therefore, if that monthly fee includes software as well as maybe doing the tax return, your clients will naturally be paying you on account within the year for doing the SA 105. So when we transition to that first year of MTD for ITSA, your clients are already paying you monthly for the service, which means the additional work required for MTD for ITSA, if the client is using the software, should be minimal, because I'll have confidence in terms of the numbers, because let's be honest, the transactions involved with the property income is very low. Maybe if there are one or two properties, a couple of receipts, some expenditure items, and therefore if they're using the software, intuitive software, they should be able to do their own quarterly updates, which then means that when you come to the end of period statement, it's like what you already do, collate the information, add a few elements in terms of maybe mileage and maybe deal with the interest relief, and then you can file the return. So therefore, it's all about trying to improve the experience which your clients have with you in terms of dealing with their annual returns. And this is the whole point, is let's see what we can do to actually embrace, let's say, that digital disruption, but also deal with that digital engagement and desirability factor of using software and getting your clients to do more. So with that, I think I've been sort of landing up in terms of the opportunity of what does Hammock do? So before I sort of let loose and share the screen with James, when we think about the challenges of, let's say, MTD ITSA going forward, one, it's a combination of software which is desirable. It needs to be engaging. It needs to enable the landlord to actually hook up as many bank accounts as they like. They may have bank accounts which may have trading expenditure inside them as well. But also it's the fact that with multiple property landlords or landlords which have property shares with other people, how do we collate all that information into one place, but also report in a way which is very easy and understandable. Now, Hammock does that already for MTD for ITSA, but also when we think about the main theme, which is all about trying to make our self-assessment periods so much easier. Yes, we've got about, 40 odd days until end of January, and we're probably having an awful lot of conversation with the landlords today, trying to get maybe their spreadsheets or just manual records together. Hammock is a really great tool for accelerating self-assessment this year, but also making sure that when we hit 21-22, we've actually got all the data already available. So we can actually bring self-assessment not to be something to which we do every November and December, but maybe something we could do every May and June. So with that in case, now, James, I'm going to try and do the magical thing of sharing your accessibility to you. So just give me 1 second. There's James, and I'm now going to make you a presenter. So you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. I think that has worked. So thank you very much, Chris. So yeah, and so to Chris's point, Hammock will solve for MTD, but we didn't build Hammock as an MTD solution. We built it as a landlord solution. It makes sure landlords' life's easier, it saves them time, saves them money, and then equally means that you have access to this data in real time, exactly when you need it. So rather than you waiting for your clients to send you data, you can do it when you have the time, manage your own calendar. I'm going to take you through the demo in 3 stages. What you're looking at right now is our landlord product. So this is actually what's in the hands of your clients. And I'm going to take you through bookkeeping and tax. Then I'm going to very briefly jump over to this other tab here, which will just show you how you manage your clients through your own accountant dashboard. And we'll talk a little bit about MTD there. Then I'm going to jump back into the landlord product and just take you through some of the additional features, because there's a lot of stuff in Hammock which actually doesn't have anything to do with taxes, things around like the EPC ratings that Chris was talking about earlier. And one final thing, yeah, if you have questions, please do pop them in the chat, because we will try and save some time at the end to run through any questions. But that being said, let's dive in. So on the landlord product itself, you've got this menu down the left-hand side, which just makes it really easy to navigate. And I'm just starting you off on the properties page here. This is also where your landlords land when they first come onto the platform. And I think you can just see straight away that it looks like a landlord product. And your clients will know that when they're using it, they'll know this is something that's for me. This is not something that's just to make my accountant's life easier. They can actually see how much money they're making on each of their properties. You'd be amazed how few landlords actually know that, even when they've only got 2. And it, by the way, it will also keep track of any arrears. Do my tenants owe me any money? Like, can I keep on top of everything? But probably the most important thing from an accountant perspective on this page is actually this box up here called portfolios, because I think, as Chris highlighted in his presentation, one of the big challenges with landlords is that you are going to have all sorts of different ownership structures. Some people own the properties in their name, some husband and wife, some family properties, or a mixture of everything. Hammock can handle all of that just by you use a different portfolio for each ownership structure, and then you can report for multiple people within the same Hammock license. So just in the case of this example, this first property here I own with my wife. She owns 75%, I own 25%. So I've just created a portfolio which I've called joint ownership, and I've set those percentages. The next two are in my name. So they're in my personal portfolio, 100% owned by me. And this bottom one's actually in my limited company. Now, obviously, that doesn't apply for Making Tax Digital at all, but obviously, as a landlord, I still want to manage everything in one place, and I still want all of those figures to do my company accounts. And actually, if I highlight this final property, you'll notice that this green dot indicates that I've added a tenancy, but I haven't actually tracked anything yet, which is why we've got zeros here. And because I've added that tenant, but I haven't tracked any rent, I've got this large arrears. So we're going to track these transactions now, and then I'm going to show you how this all feeds through the platform. And to do that, we're going to jump over to the transaction page, because this is where your landlords will connect their bank account or multiple bank accounts. Another big benefit of Hammock is an awful lot of your clients will, whether you've asked them to or not, will unfortunately just use their personal bank account, especially if they've only got one property or two properties. In a lot of softwares, that means that you've got 150 transactions there, and 145 of them you've got to mark as personal. In Hammock, that's not the case. Hammock assumes everything is personal unless you tell it otherwise. So when I'm looking at my bank feed here, I'm not going to touch this as the transaction because it doesn't relate to my property, but I am going to track this insurance payment that's underneath in Booker Limited. And to do that, I literally just click on the transaction. Menu opens up on the right hand side with all our categories all tailored to landlords. So we're going to go insurance. That's my landlord insurance for 25 New Church Road, save. You see, so it's just as easy as that. That is now tracked. And whilst landlords can be a pain, one of the big benefits of landlords is that the vast majority of their transactions are regular and recurring. And so is this landlord insurance payment. I make that every month. Just by tracking it once, that is now going to track automatically going forward. So I won't need to worry about it. Having said that, we are starting in December. So chances are I'm going to want to track back to at least April this year, if not actually April last year. So really easy to do that. Once I've tracked it here, I scroll down and I have these two options to track historical payments. The first is called Search and Track, but the other one I'm going to show you first is called View Matching Transactions. And that's just because Hammock has gone through my whole bank feed and it said, look, we found similar transactions. So if I click on here, Hammock tells me, right, this is what you've just tracked as landlord insurance in December, but all of these look similar. And you can see from the dates that these are just my monthly payments. So I can actually just select all of those going back a year and a half. And just like that, I've done all my historical payments. Moving forward, they're going to track automatically. And I can just move on to the next thing. In this case, it might be rental income. With rental income, there are two types, I guess, of rental income. That you're going to have landlords who self-manage, but you're going to have landlords who use letting agents who collect the rent and pass it on net of fees. Statistically, you're looking at about a 50-50 split across your client base, although some firms will be skewed either way. Hammock can handle both, because we were built for exactly this. So first, I'm going to show you a property I self-manage. I'm going to use the keyword search because my tenant puts their initials on their payment reference. So when I search for TSB, you can see it isolates all of these payments, and these are just my monthly rentals, going all the way back to the start of this tenancy in January. Now, I can click on any of these. It's the same process as we just tracked the insurance. Just say, right, that's my rental income. The 25 New Church Road, we're also going to link it to our tenant, Tom, and click Save. So you can see that transaction is tracked. Obviously, we want to track all these other ones. So we've got those same two options. But this time, because I've filtered, I'm going to use Search and Track. And now everything here has a little tick box. So I could go through one at a time, but I'm actually just going to select them all because I know they're all my rents. And again, next month when Tom pays the rent, I'm going to get a notification that my rent has been paid and it's been tracked. And even better than that, if Tom doesn't pay the rent, after 2 days, I'll get a notification that my rent is late, so I can start chasing it. So again, nothing really to do with your bookkeeping as such, but really useful for the landlord, so they don't have to be checking their bank account every day. Hammock will take care of that for them. So that's your basics of your bookkeeping, and we try to make this as simple as possible. And then once they're set up, the automation will take care of more than 80% of your transactions. And if we look at this property down here, you can see we've now got some numbers feeding through. We've managed to clear that arrears balance. But you'll notice I have got some tenants in arrears. And most landlords, they obviously want to know how much money they're making per property, but also they want to keep track of exactly where they stand per tenant. And we help them with that as well. So if we head over to the tenancies page, you'll see I've got a few different tenants here. Let's have a look at Robert, who is actually in arrears. And you can see when I've set this up, it's really easy to add a tenant. I've just said his name's Robert. He lives at 11 Newcastle Road. He pays just over £14.50 a month. And his tenancy started on the 19th of March. And these 3 pieces of information here are all Hammock needs in order to build this rent table, which starts at the start of the tenancy, and then every period it will just tell you how many transactions there were, what was due, what was received, and then what is the balance. And you can see here, this £830 that I'm owed now is all stemmed from this missing payment back in May. They fell into arrears for whatever reason, but actually from July onwards, they've been making multiple payments and they've been overpaying. And so Hammock just automatically recalculates every month what the latest balance is. You can even download this table as a spreadsheet or a PDF. You can share that with the landlord, with your tenant, and just make sure that everyone's on the same page. You'll also be amazed how often landlords actually discover missing or underpayments that they had no idea about previously, because not every landlord checks every month to make sure they've been paid. So this is a really, really valuable tool. However, like Robert and Tom, the one that we tracked together, they're both examples of tenants where I self-manage. So what I want to do is show you what we do with letting agents. And when you add a tenancy in Hammock, it's the first question it'll ask you actually is, what do you use a letting agent? So with Mark, I've said yes. So here, my tenant's called Mark, and Mark pays £400 a month. But because I use an agent, I've got this additional box here where my agent's called Moving On. And from that £400, they take their cut of their 12.5% or whatever it is, which Hammock has calculated for me at £53.65. So Hammock already knows my rent and my fees. And if we scroll down here, you'll see I've got the same rent table, but I've purposely not tracked November or December, just so I can show you how it works when these net payments hit your bank account. So we're going to go back to the transaction screen. And this time I'm going to search by date. And we're going to take this transaction. I'm going to have to ask you all to please ignore that this says child tax credit. It is, of course, dummy data. But what is important is the amount, or at least what this amount represents. And that is just a regular month where it's rent minus fees, and that's passed over to the landlord. If I'm doing this for the first time, again, I just say, right, that's rental income for 141 Corn Street, and save. And because Hammock knows I use a letting agent, it just breaks this out automatically. So it splits this for me into 400 of rent, 53 of fees. Statistically, about 9 or 10 months of the year, that is what you'll get. You'll get rent minus fees, and in that time, Hammock will automatically track that now because I've done the first one. It will automatically track. It will automatically gross that payment up. The only time you really need to do anything are those 2 or 3 months of the year where there's an additional expense, so maybe some maintenance or a gas certificate or an admin fee or something. And I'll show you a quick example. So if we go forward to December. And let's just pretend this £137 is the payment I get from my letting agent, and say it's because they had to send somebody around to fix the radiator. Okay, so obviously I've got less than expected. This is one of the few transactions which won't track automatically because Hammock needs to know, did the tenant underpay or was there an expense? But all I do, I just click on it, rental income, 141 Corn Street, and look, without me doing anything, Hammock will just tell me, this is less than expected. Do you want to create an expense for the difference? Now, obviously I do because we had some maintenance here. So I say, yes, I do. and then I just categorize it as maintenance, repairs, and save. And then Hammock still knows I've got my full rent. It still knows I've paid my agent fees, but now it also knows I've paid those repairs. And actually, if I want to help my accountant out a little bit here, I can add to fix the radio, so I can add a little note. It's also good for my own records because I might forget this in 6 months' time what that was. Maybe even more useful though, I can actually just attach the invoice. So I just click on here, drag and drop it into here, or find the file on my computer. In terms of invoicing and receipts, it's probably a good time to say that everything you're seeing here is also in our mobile app. And often most landlords they'll get set up on a big screen like this, but going forward, they'll use the mobile app. And if you're using the app, then you can actually just take a photo of a receipt, attach it straight to the transaction from your camera roll, so it's even easier. So that is the letting agent side. You can see if we look at Mark, the arrears have now gone. And if you imagine, there's not a single month here where £400 hit my bank account, right? But Hammock still knows I got my full rent. It knows that I'm not owed any rental income, and it's created all those expenses for me. And all of that, so that's all your bookkeeping. That all then feeds into the tax statement. And so if we head in here, this is the bit that I guess as the accountant you're most interested in. This is also where you see those 3 portfolios I talked about at the very start. And if we look at my personal portfolio first, you'll see that I own 100% of this portfolio. I can then filter this by tax year. You'll get their headline figures at the top, but most importantly, you get the numbers they need to submit to HMRC. So on an annual self-assessment basis, once April rolls around, you can go straight into their account, take these numbers, and you're not waiting for them to send you a spreadsheet anymore. You've got everything that you need. Underneath that, you get all the transactions, and these are dynamic. So if you're wondering, what is that 868 quid, you just click on it, pardon me, and you can just see, okay, it's letting agent fees and some accountancy fees. So you can kind of sense check everything here. But also where it gets really useful is what we do with those split ownership, joint ownership. Because if I go into here, you can see I only own 25% of this portfolio. So you get all the same numbers, but it highlights my 25%. So Hammock is just going to add together all of my percentages. And when you come to those quarterly filings for MTD, Hammock will add everything together for James and give you that one set of numbers that I can submit. But if you also do the tax for my wife Penny, then I can just click on Penny. Penny owns 75%, and I've got all her figures. And essentially, you can have as many different owners, as many different percentages as you like across as many portfolios. And Hammock will just add everybody's stuff together and allow you to submit for everybody from the one license. So that's kind of the tax side. I'll quickly show you how you manage your clients, and you'll do that through your own accountant dashboard. So this is what you would log into initially. You would see at the top how many licenses you've purchased from Hammock, how many clients you've got onboarded so far. And then as your landlords register, you just see them appear in your list with their headline figures here, but you can go in to any of their accounts whenever you want, just by clicking these 3 dots and clicking Explore Account. And when you do that, you basically go in, and at this point you have full access over their account. So you could go into the properties page, add anything, whatever you like in here, track transactions, add portfolios, whatever. Really, the only thing you can't do is connect their bank account in the first place, but the rest of it you could do if you wanted to. Once you're finished, though, you just click Exit Account, and then you're back on your dashboard. Now, when we're talking about making tax digital, not only will you, when MTD goes live, not only will you already have access to the final self-assessment data, so you can do that straight away. When MTD actually kicks in, it will be Hammock who will be chasing your clients by text message, by email, and by push notification on the mobile app to let them know, hey Marcus, it's time for you to submit. We're the ones who say, hey Marcus, here's your quarter. Are you happy with this? If they are, they'll tick confirmed. If they're not, obviously they'll make some changes and then confirm. At that point, we would then just notify you Marcus's account is ready for a review, and you can go in and one button, send that off to HMRC. So you should just make all of that, especially that first year, that transition year where you've got that dual workflow, which Chris talked about earlier. It's just going to make that so much easier if you can manage the timeline, and if Hammock is taking some of that pressure off you on the chasing side. So you're then just reviewing and signing. You've got some other stuff on here. So we've got on the onboarding page, you've got some marketing materials. I won't go through these now. There's some stuff you might find useful. And then you've got pages here to either invite your clients or invite your colleagues if you want to invite your other staff to view the dashboard. So that's kind of how you manage it. I want to just jump in. I've probably got a few minutes left. I just want to show you some of the additional features now, because the thing with Hammock is, as I've probably said a couple of times, this is not an MTD solution. This is a landlord solution. There's a lot of stuff in here which is going to make you and your landlord's lives easier and add value. I just want to take you through a bit of stuff on the overview screen. Because first of all, just visually, landlords able to see how much money are they making overall, where are their spikes in expenses, maybe is there anything we can do to start lowering those. We can also get up-to-date property valuations. So Hammock, we partner with third-party data providers, things like Rightmove, Zoopla, Land Registry, etc., to get up-to-date valuations. So if I come into my asset analysis box, and let's just say that when I added 11 Newcastle Road, I thought this was worth 165k, but if I want to get a new up-to-date estimate, I can just click on here, enter the property type, which in this case is a 4-bed terrace, and that will just update for me. Now you can see I've already got my purchase price and my mortgage balance in there. So now not only do I know what is my portfolio worth, I also know my loan to value. And this is useful information for you as well. You can start having those more interesting conversations around things like inheritance tax, and turning these clients from your lowest margin clients to actually, oh look, maybe there's some advisory piece we could do here. Maybe there's some other ways we can increase the fees to add more value. And I think this kind of insight will really help, especially if you compare it with things like the rental yields. How does their rental yield compare to their mortgage balance? Do all of these properties make sense as investments? Should we be selling this property here and buying another one here because the yield's 4 times as much? Having access to this data will hopefully just allow you to have those more interesting conversations. The 2 more things I'm going to show you actually. So one of them is Chris already touched on towards the start, that we are in a period of huge change for landlords, and one of those big changes is around the energy efficiency of the properties. So from 2025, all properties will need to, if you want to rent them out to somebody new, they need to have an energy rating of a C or above. It's something that actually not that many landlords know about. In fact, not many accountants do actually either, although it is growing. But the reason I bring that up is because this was announced actually in 2021. And when that was announced, we decided to link Hammock directly to the government database for EPCs. So if you come in here, we don't just, I've added a property here, we don't just pull the image from Google Street View. You go in here, we actually pull the energy performance certificate automatically as well. And this property is a great example because this is a D. And so this, if they want to continue renting this, they are going to have a decision to make. And do they want to spend this money? The potential is there. They can get this up. It's just whether or not they want to spend that money. The latest report I saw is that the average cost of getting a property up to a C for those affected is going to be about £9 grand. But some will be much more than that. Some will obviously be less. Again, it's 3 years away, but these are things that people won't want to decide overnight. You really want to be giving this information to your clients as early as possible. So you can even go in and look at your client's property, see if they're going to be affected. If they are, have that conversation. Because also what's going to happen is a lot of landlords are going to sell because they're going to say, do you know what, I don't want to spend 14 grand on some wall insulation. This property doesn't make me any money already because of all the changes to everything else. So they might decide to sell. But if we have a look at this property in particular, and we go into that Google Street View, so you can move this around anyway, but if this property is a D, pretty likely that all these other properties side by there on either side that all look pretty similar are probably also Ds. And what you don't want to be doing is waiting to the last minute and then half your street puts their property on at the same time, and then prices collapse. So definitely one of those things I think you want to be getting ahead of. You want to be giving this information to your clients. And then the final thing, this is really just a stress saver for your clients. We call it our documents area. There's so much stuff, so much legislation and things that landlords have to remember. I've only got one property, but I've still got my gas certificate, my electric certificate. 2 different insurance policies, my tenancy agreements, my EPC, the list goes on and on. You can see just here from the number of different categories you can add. But landlords can upload all of their important documents in one place, including any documents that they want to share with you. So if they ever need to check something, it's there. But most importantly, they set the expiry date. So Hammock starts sending them reminders. So you don't end up in like the awful position that to a landlord I spoke to a month or 2 ago, where they accidentally forgot to renew their gas certificate, which meant all their insurance was invalid when they got burgled, and so they weren't covered. So the landlords do worry about this stuff. And having a system that's just going to take that stress away and remind them, it's just so useful. And that is Hammock in a nutshell. I guess it's worth saying we do have all our training videos on the platform. It's an easy system anyway, but there are training videos for anything you might need. We also have live chat. So during office hours, this is essentially instant chat with our team here in London. So as people are using it, if they need any help, we're always there to help. But yeah, Chris, I guess that's it from a demo perspective. So I don't know if I want to hand back to you. I don't know if you had any questions coming through.
We do have a couple of questions, so let's deal with them. So everyone's been quite active and asking some quite sensible questions, which I think some of them you've covered already, so it may be worth I'll just go over again. So the first question is from Maria. Does Hammock cater for HMOs, or could we use Hammock in a way which actually helps manage HMOs?
Absolutely. So in fact, Hammock's really popular with HMO landlords because the way we price Hammock is per property, not per tenancy or per room. So you might have a 5-bed HMO, but in Hammock that still counts as one property. When you add a property in here, if it is an HMO, you just tick this yes. It will then ask you the number of rooms, and then you add the property. So what it means is you'll have one property here, but then you'll have, on that one property, you might have 3 different tenancies. So you still track the rent per tenant, but you'll track all the P&L per property.
Brilliant, thank you. Will you explain how this would work if clients are using a managing agent? I think you've touched upon it in terms of the grossing up, but maybe worth just touching again in terms of you've got a net receipt, how would you deal with that? Or how would it automatically deal with that as well?
Yeah, so what I'll do, if I go back into the tenancy where I use a managing agent, which is Mark, in fact, it's pretty easy if I just do it via the bank feed. Let's just take any transaction. I'm just going to look for an incoming transaction. So let's imagine that this rent here, £70, comes through from my managing agent. And the reason it's only £70 is because there has been some expenses on the property. So it's come in not only net of letting agent fees, but net of expenses. When I click on this property, this transaction, and I say, right, that is rental income, and I select the property that I've added a tenant via, which uses a letting agent, it will come up here and it will tell me this rent is less than expected. Do you want to create an expense for the difference, which in this case would be 276.35? I can just say yes. I can then choose what that could be. It could be any type of expense, might even be some additional letting agent fees, for example. And then when I track that, Hammock just automatically splits that out. So that £70 that hit my bank, Hammock knows that what that really represents is the £400 of rental income, the £53 of letting agent fees, and now this additional £276, which, again, I chose letting agent fees, but it could have been anything. So that way, you don't need to worry when there's net amount. You don't have to spend lots of time manually grossing things up. Hammock will just do it for you automatically.
Brilliant. So I think this is a really good question. So I know the person asked the question is a sole proprietor. So obviously they haven't got any staff, so therefore lack of time. Does Hammock / Sage provide any help to help onboard the client?
Yeah, so Hammock, we're getting busier and busier all the time. So the level of support we can offer, the level of support we can offer is always going to be greatest now rather than later. But if you are to come on board with Hammock, and if you do take one of our starter bundles, which means just buying a package of licenses, that comes with all the training and support included for free. And that includes like regular webinars that your clients can join. They're live webinars run by our team here, where they basically take them through the process of showing them how to add a property, how to add a tenant, how to track their rent, how to track all their expenses, talk them through the platform. They can join multiple webinars if they want to. Most won't need to. But once they're on the platform, say they've got access to all our training videos, which will take you through all sorts of things. So I'll quickly show here. So first you've got the basics. So how do I connect my bank account? How do I track rent? How do I manually add a transaction? Maybe I paid something in cash. How do I split a transaction? There's all sorts of stuff in here across multiple categories. And then the other thing that they always use a lot will be the live chat. So if they have any questions, they pop it in here. Our team will come straight back. The only time we won't be able to give them a direct answer is if they're asking us for tax advice, in which case we would always send them back to the accountant. But if it's anything platform related, we'll deal with them one-on-one, meaning that you don't need to as the accountant.
Cool. So I think this question we raised quite a few times. So the scenario being is I have a client, they're a self-employed builder. They also have a little rental property and all the receipts and expenditure go into one bank account. Now, in a perfect world, we try to be advocating, set up a separate bank account, put your rental income and expenditure in one place, you can track it, but practically what are we going to be doing? So my advice is the fact that you'll use Hammock for dealing with the rental side. And then for the trade, you'll then use hopefully one of the Sage's products. Now, there may be some confusion in terms of what do you do with the bank account. I think this is where Hammock's ideal, because what you would do in Sage accounting or whatever Sage product you use for managing a sole trader is anything to do with the property. It's effectively a drawing, isn't it? That's where it'll go into the capital account. And then when you use Hammock, you'll hook up the same bank account to the bank feed within Hammock and only deal with the rental property. So the answer is you'll have two subscriptions, one specializing in sole traders, which will be Sage, and then one specializing in rental property, which will be Hammock. Yes, you may have one bank account, but that one bank account can have a bank feed going to both products.
Yeah, and actually, Chris, just on that, I think it's really important to say that when you have that situation, I actually think it's a huge advantage to have two softwares because they are two separate businesses. Part of the good thing I think about MTD is it's going to start forcing landlords to realize that this huge asset that they own that gives them a reasonably high income is a business. And I think by having something that's completely tailored and set for that is exactly what's needed. Similarly on the sole trade, they're going to want something so when they're logged into there, they know that they're only looking at their sole trade. So I actually think it's a huge benefit actually.
So here's a question from Dan. Is there a demo copy of this we can try? So I suppose is there a demo which can log into the website, or is it best just to actually go through with one of your agents?
So we do have access to a demo account. I would suggest is if you are interested, the first port of call would be to book in for a session with one of our team who can take you through things, answer any particular questions. But yeah, once we've done that, we can absolutely give you access to a demo account. It's just a login to Hammock, but every time you log in, it will have reset. So you can play around with your heart's content. You hopefully shouldn't be able to break it.
Okay. How does Hammock deal with VATable and non-VATable items? So before you answer, James, I think the key thing is actually VAT will only be dealt with in terms of if the property is opted to tax, and that's usually a commercial property, probably something which Hammock is looking at in the future. So therefore, VAT is not dealt with at the moment, but it probably comes down to what your roadmap's looking like, James, and your priorities.
Yeah, so we've got, obviously this is the kind of MTD self-assessment version of Hammock, but in Q1 next year, we've got our limited company version. And then I would have thought very soon after that, the VAT piece for commercial will come in. So this is all like months away rather than way off into the future.
Yeah, and I think they'll also support those other conversations because we've got clients who've got SIPs, etc. They've got property locked up, they're dealing with VAT returns, and they just want life a little bit easier. So here's a question here, and how will the figures be submitted via MTD? Is it going to be directly from Hammock? The question is yes. So this is the whole point of the partnership with Sage. Sage has a pedigree and experience in terms of working with other technology partners because Sage has built all the rich endpoints, the capabilities of working with HMRC. Products like Hammock, they're doing an amazing service in terms of actually supporting the landlord clients and accountants in terms of the bookkeeping tool, but may not have the experience in terms of dealing with HMRC and doing that submission. So what we're helping Hammock do is within Hammock, you'll be able to do the quarterly updates as well as the end of period statement. So you don't need any other piece of software. There'll be no other exporting data. It'll all be within Hammock, be able to do those quarterly updates and the end of period statement, which then means when you come to the final declaration or the brand new self-assessment tax return, that will be done via your new self-assessment year-end compliance software, whether that's Sage or another provider. And so I think this comes down to the point is we're trying to make life as easy as possible, as painless as possible, and not having to move data across. So it'll all be done within Hammock.
And actually, one additional piece. So when it comes to those quarterly filings, you can decide on a client-by-client basis whether, when Hammock chases the client for them to sign off their figures, if you don't want to have to review it, you can turn off the review step so that data goes straight through to HMRC. Or if you're obviously planning to review it as part of your service, then you'd leave that review step on. And that comes down to that piece that Chris was talking about pricing. And this can become an active part of how you price your package. It's like if they want low touch and want to pay less, fine, but you then need to make sure that you're not having to do that additional work that you're not being paid for.
So here's a question for me. So I have an estate agent contact. How do I get them engaged with Hammock? Well, we're both on social media, James. So Ian, if you just want to drop us a message, we'll get the right person to speak to your contact. So I've just dealt with the quarterly update question previously. How will this link to Sage software? Well, the answer is it doesn't have to be, because the quarterly updates will be done within the product itself. But I suspect with the side hustle question to this is you touched upon the fact that you can have your sole trade or your individual property portfolio, but also you can manage your limited company property portfolios. And therefore, with that, you may want to export the data or the rental income into a solution which will deal with limited companies properly. That's on the roadmap. But also, Hammock is building out that limited company structure as well. So again, in theory, you don't need another product for dealing with properties, really. It's trying to keep everything under one roof. If we need to make any adjustment, how can we do that through Hammock? I suppose, James, the question is, let's just say you've got an end of year adjustment, you put some mileage claims through. How does one edit the transaction, possibly do other sort of transactions like that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really easy to edit a transaction. You literally just click on it here. And if that's the wrong category, just remove the category, pick a different one, pick the property, and it's done. So it really is as simple as that. In terms of adjustments, so after a quarter is submitted, Hammock will obviously record exactly what was there when that submission was made. Any changes made by the landlord afterwards would be tracked on our end as adjustments, so that you then can submit them either in a future quarter or in your EOPS and final declaration.
So here's another question from Ian. So could a letting agent with over 100 plus properties via around 50 to 60 landlords, could they use Hammock software to link and coordinate all the payments, etc.?
So they can, yeah, absolutely. They can use it for the bookkeeping side. We actually work with lots of letting agents. We tend to work with those on the smaller end who just want bookkeeping, because if that's what you want, then Hammock's brilliant. You do get to a certain size with a letting agent where you might then want things that are going to track your maintenance and or store your contractors and manage your workflows. But if you're just looking for something for bookkeeping, then yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So I think that's all the questions for today's session. So hopefully those who have been watching today quite like what we've seen with Hammock. To me, it's a beautiful piece of software. I wish I had it back in practice. Certainly would have made my life easier, because I remember this time of year trying to chase the information, and effectively the only information you get is probably on the end of a telephone call. So you like something a bit more substantial. But certainly the ability to actually get the tax returns done, maybe in May or June every year, because all the data's all in one place, it's so worthwhile. Now, James, because this is a call with, let's say, Sage people or Sage customers on it, do you want to sort of discuss what the price points is as well? Because I think that's quite important.
Yeah, so let me, let's have a look. So assuming you're coming on board next year, so this is our 2023 pricing. So what you see on the screen right now is our single license price. So if you're like, I love Hammock, but I'm not interested in bundles or anything, I just want to buy a license, these are the prices you're looking at. And it's all based on one thing and one thing only, and that is the number of properties. So as I said, HMOs are great because they just count as one property. But yeah, multiple bank accounts, multiple owners, all fine. You'll find that the majority of your clients will be in this 1 to 3 bracket, usually about 80%. unless you have a particular focus on property. But it's a monthly subscription, £4.99 a month plus VAT for the 1 to 3, and then slightly more for the medium and large portfolios. We also run onboarding sessions. So these are webinars that your clients can join, where one of our team will guide them through and show them how to set up an account. Not every landlord would need them, but some do like them. And if they do, they're just a one-off cost of £49 plus VAT. Having said that, almost no accountants do it this way, the single license way. Most will buy one of our starter bundles. The discounts you see here are for as long as you hold the license. So for your small landlords, it's just £2.99 a month plus VAT. Basically the price of a cup of coffee. And if that's a husband and wife, that's effectively £1.50 each. But you also get 20% off your pro and 20% off the portfolio as well. All licenses start as starter licenses, so you don't need to tell me how many of each of these you want. If you buy, say, a bundle of 20 licenses, they all start as starter licenses, and then it's just as your clients sign up, if one of them happens to have 7 properties, that one license just jumps to a pro. And that all happens. And the really good thing about Hammock, and it's just because we believe in it so much, is that there is no minimum term. You can sign up today, you can leave tomorrow. So we don't tie you into anything. It's just a monthly rolling, because we know that once your client's using Hammock, you'll never, you'll have no reason to want to leave anyway. So really low risk on your part, really good value, I think. And then on top of this, the other reason people take the bundles over the single licenses is because you also get all of the training and support for free. So it's training for your staff, but most importantly, those webinars for your clients, they get access to those for all licenses for free, meaning that really is, very easy to get this up and running quickly. And then, when April rolls around, you've got everything you need to start doing their self-assessment. You don't have to be waiting till this time next year and chasing people, which I know everyone on this call will probably have a few clients they know is a real pain right now, chasing them. You could have had this done 6 months ago, so that would be my message.
Brilliant, thank you. And so this will be the last question of the session. So does the information flow through to Sage for the end of year tax statement? Well, technically no, because just to sort of explain the flow of how MTD is going to be working is whatever piece of software you're using for your sole traders or your landlords, you'll be using the digital tools, you'll file a quarterly update to HMRC. You'll then produce something called an end of period statement. So this is the crystallization of the trade or maybe the rental income, and then that is fired off to HMRC. So when you prepare the final declaration, or that is when you're actually going to be within the software, this is where you'll be supplementing the income of that individual with employment income, dividends and interest, etc. But when it comes to that end of period statement information, you're not dragging it from the software, you're dragging from what's already been submitted to HMRC. So therefore, the flow of information is use the digital bookkeeping tools from Sage or Hammock, file quarterly to HMRC, complete the end of period statement within the respective software, file that end of period statement to HMRC, prepare the final declaration where you'll effectively be dragging through or sucking the end of period statement from HMRC. And so that's the flow of information. So hopefully everyone's enjoyed the last hour. I certainly have. I learn something new every time I see the demo. There's always a new feature which I like to see. So if you want to hear any more about this, just please reach out to your normal Sage contact. There'll be some follow-up emails. And so last but not least, I hope everyone has a great Christmas, some break if you can do so. So I know it's pretty crazy out there with the January deadlines. But thank you for joining us today, and hopefully see you all very soon.